Hello everyone. Today we're doing something a bit different at Curious Edge. If you enjoy it, make sure you leave a like and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Trigger warning: the following story contains dark, adult-only themes. We'll keep it clean for YouTube, of course, but if you're easily triggered, this true crime story might not be for you.
Back in 1989, the Rogers family consisted of Hal, Joan, both 36, Michelle 17, and Christy 14. They lived in Wilshire, Ohio, a small farming village in Van Wert County. Hal and Joe were high school sweethearts that got married shortly after their graduation, when Joe got pregnant. While they had some financial struggles, they seemed like your typical, middle-class, all-American family, but things were about to take a dark turn. John, Hal's brother, had moved into a trailer on their modest dairy farm a few years prior, and often helped out doing chores and work around the farm. People in the community described John as a bit weird, saying he often went about in army fatigues and bragged about having gone out on missions with the CIA and Secret Service. They had no idea how weird he really was, until his ex-girlfriend reported him to the police for assaulting her. Apparently, they had broken up, but she had kept living in the trailer until she could find a place of her own. One evening in the trailer, she was grabbed by a man in a mask. He put a knife to her throat to keep her from screaming, handcuffed her, blindfolded her, and proceeded to assay her. Unfortunately for John, she recognized his voice and quickly reported him to police. After he was arrested, police found that he had videotaped his assault on his girlfriend, and while searching his trailer, came upon incriminating pictures and videos of his own niece, Michelle, who could be heard in the videos crying and begging him to stop. She had never reported him because he threatened to kill her, and she believed him. After these appalling revelations, the family was devastated. What made it even worse was that Hal and John's mother took John's side, claiming to anyone that would listen that Michelle, her own granddaughter, was lying and had tried to set him up. She didn't even tell the police until after they found the evidence. Hal was understandably furious and immediately cut his mother out of his life. John denied the whole thing, claiming he had been set up. Of course, no one bought it, aside from his delusional mother. He ended up being sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison for the assault of his ex-girlfriend. The charges brought against him in Michelle's case, however, were dropped when she refused to testify. She was determined to live as normal a life as possible, going to school, parties, and spending time with her boyfriend. Not a life filled with lawyers, court dates, and constant tension. Hal fell into a cycle of depression and guilt over what had been happening, and the rest of the family struggled as well. One day, John decided they should take a vacation, get away from the bad memories for a while, to try and heal. It was decided that it would be a girls' trip, just Joan and her daughters. They were so excited to get away. They'd never been on a vacation and decided to go to Florida, the perfect place to bask in the sun and blow the clouds away. They made plans, packed their bags, and on May 26, 1989, they drove south until they hit Georgia, where they stayed the night in a motel. The following morning, they drove through Georgia until they finally reached Florida, where their first stop was the Jacksonville Zoo. The vacation continued in the same vein for the next 4 days: sightseeing, driving, and motels. On Monday, May 29th, Joe wrote a postcard for Hal, telling him how the girls were dragging her all over Florida, but in a way that he could tell they were having a great time. On Thursday, June 1st, they left Orlando and headed for Tampa, where they planned to go to Busch Gardens. Once they arrived in Tampa, they drove around for a little while looking for their motel, the Days Inn at Rocky Point. Eventually, Joe pulled over to look at the map, which was on a brochure she had picked up with tourist information about Clearwater Beach. As Joe sat studying the map, a man approached the car. He was white, probably in his mid to late 30s, with sandy hair and a mustache. The man asked them if they were lost, as he noticed their Ohio plates and assumed they were not from the area. On the Clearwater Beach brochure, the man wrote down directions to the motel. Then he made them an offer. Would they like to come out on his boat that evening to watch the sunset? He seemed friendly and non-threatening, so why not? Joe and the girls liked the idea. He told Joe how to get to the boat launch only a mile away. Once there, look out for a blue and white boat, he added. They checked into the day's inn at around 12:30 p.m. Joe wrote down the directions he had given them to the boat launch and the description of the boat on the motel stationery. It's not clear how they spent the afternoon. They ate dinner at the restaurant attached to the motel that evening, where they were spotted by another visitor, a businessman from Texas. Michelle said hello to him as they passed his table on their way out, around 7:30 p.m. They went back to their room briefly, before heading out to the boat launch. While in the room, they took a few photos, one of Michelle in white shorts and blue bikini top, sitting on the floor of their room. The other photo was of the sunset view of Tampa Bay from their balcony. From there, they drove to the boat launch. It's believed they boarded between 8:30 and 9 p.m. as the sun was setting. On the morning of June 4th, tourists on a sailboat in the Tampa Bay spotted a body floating in the water. The Coast Guard was quickly called, and following 2 more reports, they eventually found the bloated bodies of 3 people in the bay. They had some difficulty getting them out of the water, as 30-pound blocks were tied to the necks of each of them. They eventually cut the ropes to make it easier to retrieve them. Each victim was floating face down, their ankles bound together, and their hands tied behind their backs with yellow rope. Their mouths were taped shut with duct tape. They were nude from the waist down. By this time, the Rogers women were supposed to be back in Ohio, and Hal had filed a missing persons report when he couldn't reach them 3 days after they should have returned, and they didn't arrive at home. When their missing persons report reached the Tampa police, the puzzle pieces started to fit together. The Tampa police asked Hal to send dental records of his missing family, and when he did, the worst was confirmed. The bodies found in the bay were none other than his wife and teenage girls. They were all gone, bodies found floating in the Tampa Bay like debris. After ruling out Hal as a suspect, due to his having obviously been in Ohio, the police focused on locating the car of Joe and the girls. It didn't take long to find their car. It was the notes on the brochure and motel stationery inside that gave them clues as to what happened. The handwriting on the hotel stationery was identified as Joe's. The handwriting on the Clearwater Beach brochure, however, matched neither Joe's nor that of her daughters. It was the directions to their motel. 5 billboards were put up, with the handwritten directions and the question, "Who wrote these directions? You may know who killed the Rogers family. $25,000 reward." This, along with a composite sketch by another victim, Judy Blair of Canada, that was assaulted prior to the Rogers family but not unalived, led to the eventual capture of Oba Chandler, who happened to have a blue and white boat. Detectives got a call from a local Tampa Bay woman, Joanne Steffi, who informed them that she recognized the handwriting as that of an aluminum contractor she had previously hired. She still had the receipt for the job he had done for her. The handwriting on Joanne Steffi's receipt was compared with that on Rogers' brochure. There was no doubt about it, according to the forensic document examiner, that they were written by the same individual. On September 24, 1992, Chandler was arrested and taken into custody. On September 29, 1994, a jury found Oba Chandler guilty of the murders of Joe, Michelle, and Christy Rogers. Each member of the jury voted for the death penalty, and on November 4, the judge sentenced Chandler to death. The entire time Chandler sat on Florida's death row, he maintained his innocence and made multiple appeals. None were granted. Just over 17 years after Chandler received his death sentence, he was put to death by lethal injection on November 17, 2011. He was 65 years old.